What's going on, guys? Back here with another edition of Talking Indiana Baseball. I'm Cooper Trinkle, here with Connor Matting as always. Today, we get to switch things up a little bit and flex our muscle. We talked in depth the last two episodes about the underclass talent within the state of Indiana, focusing on our 2028s last week as they begin their ascent into the college recruiting spotlight. The week before that, we rolled out our initial 2029 rankings, and now we get to shift focus to the 2026s that will be under the prep draft microscope this spring. Point blank, this is the strength of prep baseball. Our bandwidth truly covers all areas of prep baseball within the state of Indiana. We have a unique opportunity to not only identify, but evaluate talent before they walk into high school, and then we promote them to college recruiters before having the opportunity to rub elbows with professional scouts, watching the same players that we evaluated and identified as 14 and 15-year-olds walk out of high school as prep draft prospects. In the middle, we do the work. At the underclass level, our lists serve as an identifier for college recruiters. Now, the 2026 list serves as a draft board that we publish on our website. With the draft board, we become more critical, and the player is now measured on the professional scale. To dive in a little bit more on that, I want to talk about the professional scale. Okay, so mostly what we're going to talk about in the professional scale is the 5 tools. While we can grade some other things, but the hit for power, the field, the throw, and the run are the 5 tools that we grade most often, right? The young ages, it's easy, it's easy to dream on the ceiling of every player, right? But as those guys are aging, we start to evaluate them on that professional scale. And so just real quick, as kind of a preface, I want to talk on this because we are going to be throwing out some grades as we're doing this. A 20 is a non-tool, right? A 30 is a well below average tool. A 40 is a below average tool. A 50 is a big league average tool. And it's important to note we're talking big league average. 60 is a plus, 70 is a double plus, 80 is a Hall of Fame level tool. So think of an 80 as a Shohei Ohtani power, right? A once in a generation type power that is a Hall of Fame level tool. Okay, so I felt it was necessary to preface those things before we get into this because we are going to throw some of those grades out there. Connor, I want to turn it over to you. Did I miss anything there? Just talking about kind of the way our process is built towards these professional prospects, or what do you think?
I don't think you missed a ton. I think the biggest thing is we see these kids, we first see them at a Rising Stars event. We see how they grow. We see the makeup, and then we kind of not present them, but talk with scouts, and they just see them for a small period. We've seen them for a much longer period, which is why you've talked about, Phil's talked about, this is why we're the best in the business of what we do, because we see them for the longest time and we know them the best. That's all really I got.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Because, yeah, again, talking with those scouts, right? Like, I've had some conversations with like 2027s with scouts, but really they're like operating one, maybe two classes at a time, right? And so that's a good point to note of, we do get extended to where when those professional scouts are calling us, they're more asking us to fill in the gap, right? Like, hey, what was this kid like as a sophomore? What's the makeup progression been like, different things like that. And obviously with our showcases, we're able to help them start to be comfortable in the grades that they put on players, right? Like, when they're grading power, they're more doing it on game power. But with our showcases, right, we're able to give them a very clear picture of, hey, this is what the raw power is. His exit velocity was this at our showcase, right? So right now it is X raw power. So on and so forth with all tools, but great point there. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this. It's a smaller group, so this will be a smaller episode. Just because, for the 99%, they're going to go to college, right? And if they're going to be professional prospects, they're going to make their way through that. But we do. I released an article here a couple days ago. Kind of going into a data dive of the professional signees out of Indiana within the last 13 years. That's kind of where our database is most thorough. And so, of that data, we've had 22 selections in the last 13 drafts. Kind of went into some money, some bonus money within that article. But, again, it's a smaller group here, but it's led by a guy that's a really exciting prospect for this spring, and that's Sean Dunlap. Catcher out of Crown Point, currently ranked as the number 2 prep catcher in the country per our national rankings. He's a guy that, I've talked through some professional scouts, and he's got a chance to be a day one pick this year, right? And what comes with a day one pick out of high school is a 7-figure bonus. And you can see why when you watch Sean, right? Like, it's different than just about anybody. It's a 6'3", 205-pound Adonis looking, linebacker type build with the athleticism of an outside linebacker that can maybe go cover a slot. It's loud tools. It's fringe plus raw power at the moment, right? The arm strength has a chance to be a plus. For me, I think the questions that Sean's going to have to answer this spring, and that's kind of what we're going to focus on here is, what do these guys need to do to get the money that is going to buy them out of, their college commitment, right? I think the receiving ability first and foremost is going to be the biggest thing that Sean gets put under this spring. Here's the deal. It's a 6'6" runner who has the athleticism to play center field, and he will play center field for Crown Point some this spring. Now, if we're looking more forecasting him as a professional prospect, it's likely going to be a right field type build for that level. But point blank, like middle of the diamond athletes make the most money. I think there was one point in my data dive, 99% of the bonus money given to prep signees from Indiana since 2013 have been through the middle of the diamond, right? Whether it's a pitcher, middle infielder, center fielder, 99% of the bonus money has gone there. And so for Sean, if he wants to get the most amount of bonus money that he can, right, it's going to be first and foremost saying, hey, like, I'm an organizational guy that can, I can catch in the big leagues. I can be a number 1 type catcher for a big league team. And then beyond that, I think it's the quality of the hit tool and how much game power he gets into, right? Like, I definitely see a path for him that if he goes out and he handles the spotlight well, he's going to end up in that top 100 type pick, be a 7-figure bonus type guy. So he's going to be one that I know I'll see plenty of. I know you'll see plenty of. Will be right on top of that. Has a chance to be the first prep catcher signed out of Indiana since Tucker Barnhart in 2009. And obviously he had a great career. So Sean's looking to follow in those footsteps. I have kind of a soft comp on Sean with like Henry Davis is one that comes to mind for me with the Pirates. Dylan Dingler with the Tigers is another one. They're 2 guys that I had the opportunity to play against, Dingler in high school and college, and then Henry in college. And again, I would say a lot of the same things about those guys that I said about Sean, a little bit ago, right? Like just absolute physical freak specimen athlete with real raw power and a ton of arm strength. So he leads this group. I think he, of all indications, has a chance to be the highest pick of this group. But, we can't talk prep drafts in Indiana without talking arm talent, right? That's where 70% of our draft signs since 2013 have been pitchers, right? Jump shots and fastballs. The shooter hunt quote, it's applicable, it's real, right? Like our state produces arm talent and even beyond that, right? Like we average over 1 high school draft arm a year. Okay, so like looking at this, forecasting this out, like we have some really good arms here at the top of this class. Like the numbers say that one of them is going to sign a professional contract, and the leader in the clubhouse is Gannon Grant. Connor, I'll let you go ahead and give the tail of the tape kind of on Gannon. What do you have on Gannon? How much you seen of him? What do you like?
Yeah, again, 6'2", 185. He kind of really stamped himself as the top arm in the class this past year. Prep baseball American game was like 93, 95. I think he was up to 96 later in the summer too. It's a wipeout breaking ball. He's thrown the changeup a little bit more in the past than he has recently, but it's a solid offering. He really hasn't thrown it a ton recently from what I've seen, but the breaking ball is what you're getting there. He's super confident kid. I mean, just swagger. See him walking off the mound in between innings like he is confident. Gannon Grant, knows he's good, and you can see that with the way he pitches. I think the biggest thing for him is just, can you dominate high school? Center Grove's going to play a tough schedule. If you can't dominate high school and you're a pitcher, then like if you're not dominating high school hitters, then what are we doing, you know? Um, but yeah, you're getting 93, 95. I feel like he's going to touch some sevens, maybe some even eights. But the breaking ball is what stands out the most with Gannon. It's a real pitch. And yeah,
No, for sure. And to go on even further with kind of what you talk about, what's he got to do this spring, right? Like it's not just dominate high school hitters, but it's dominate high school hitters with the fastball.
yeah,
I think where you start to see him of like I remember Cam Tilley, Cam Sullivan in their draft years. A lot of the questions were like, can they get guys out with the fastball? You knew the breaking ball had a chance to be a plus, right? But the fastball was hey, we need this to be able to get high school hitters out because we have to at least be able to keep professional hitters honest with it. And knowing kind of under the hood metrics with Gannon, what it's going to come down to is it's not a big sink fastball. It's not a big carries fastball. He will flash some carry, and he'll flash some like arm side run on it. But I think the extension is really where the lowest hanging fruit is for him. It was like sub 6 foot extension as a junior. I think if he's able to, play that up a little bit, I think that helps the properties. But kind of like you talked about, right? Like him dominating this spring is only going to grab more helium. He's a guy that's going to be valued for his pitchability. First and foremost, like he kind of reminds me of Matt Fisher in that regard of, Fisher we knew going in was like comfortable starter because of the pitchability, where a lot of the high school prospects we've had have been like loud stuff, but like the question mark is like, can they start, right? Like I think Gannon has that question answered. More what it's going to come down to is, does the fastball dominate high school hitters? And as you alluded to, like as a sophomore, that changeup was lethal. Like, does that come back into a third bat missing pitch that elevates his stock into a potential 7-figure bonus? Right. That's kind of what we're going to be looking for this spring, and I know that's what professional scouts are going to be looking for as well. But beyond that, man, like we have some real contenders who are behind him. Right. Like I think Hudson Devon is another one that I've heard great feedback from scouts. As far as the most pro looking type arm, like it's him, right? Like he's 6'4", 6'5", downhill, down your throat with a fastball that may touch triple digits this spring. The breaking ball has made strides. The overall control has made strides. Talk to me a little bit about Hudson, Connor. Like, what are you looking for Hudson to improve upon this spring to jump into that potential 7-figure bonus type bucket?
yeah. You watch Hudson, and it's everything you want. I think the biggest thing for him this spring is just consistent fastball strikes. Because if he's consistent with the fastball, then we're talking he's going to be what you're talking about with the potential big time guy. But we just need to see it more consistently. We've seen it at times. He'll go in spurts, but then he'll also go in spurts where he loses confidence in the fastball and he goes to the breaking ball. So I think just confidence and putting the fastball over the white consistently is the biggest thing for Hudson in the spring.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I will be intrigued to see the adjustments coming out of the offseason. Right, last year he tinkered with like a sinker type fastball and a four seam. I'm curious to see if that's the way he continues to go. Does he go more north and south like he was as a younger kid, where it was like big heavy four seam carry with more of a downer breaking ball, where now he's almost gone like where he'll show that some, but then it'll go to like sinker with kind of more sweepy look, and like the release will be inconsistent because of it. He's, if I'm looking at this, I think probably the biggest wild card on our board for this year,
He's
right?
more the
Like
kind of loud you're talking about, loud guys rather than
a hundred
reliable
percent.
strike throws. He's
100%, right? He is on the other end of Gannon, where like Gannon's floor is so high from the pitchability that he brings, where Hudson's more of like that ceiling is immense. And again, I think there's real chance that we hear rumors or we see 100 mile an hour velo from him this spring. Like he's steadily trended every single year. It was 92 as a freshman. It was 94, 95 as a sophomore. It was 97 last year. Does he make that jump into triple digits? Because if he does that, I mean, again, look at like a Jack Bauer from last year, right? The same questions were on Bauer. Now we're talking a lefty versus a righty, so there is some value that it already comes with the left-handed arm. But Bauer was a guy going into the spring that scouts had almost written off as a non-strike thrower, right? He comes out in the spring, makes some adjustments, grabs like 100 plus. I don't, it was 102, maybe 103, something like that. There were all kinds of crazy rumors going around the Midwest last spring of like just fuel from Bauer, right? Like, I think Devon's on that like Bauer watch. I wouldn't put it as like a hey, like this is a potential $3-4 million bonus guy where we started to hear those numbers with Bauer, but it's a wild card, and he's going to be one that we're going to have to get looks on early and often. I know professional scouts are going to flock to Mooresville, see Coach Eric Magaya, and see the Mopai
Bye.
guys, um, watch Hudson. So, and beyond that, again, we continue to talk about the depth of the arms in this class. Now, like there's another 2 to 3 arms that are really right on his heels, and we'll lead with Aiden Smith, who I'll touch on. Like Aiden's one of my favorite movers in the class. He's another guy that I think has a chance to grab real helium this spring. We've seen flashes of like a huge ceiling from Aiden Smith. It's more of the Gannon type of like, hey, this guy's thrown strikes as long as we've known him, and that's always what he's done. I remember we ranked him initially in our top 20 when he was throwing like 79 miles an hour because it was an awesome mover and he threw a ton of strikes, and he was one of those guys that ended up clicking. Right now it's 90, 93 this spring. Or last spring, right? Got a chance to be even higher this spring. It's an array of potential average to better offerings. If we're talking the pro scale, I'd like to see the slider come back to what it was as an underclassman with a little bit more depth and a little bit more bite. He's started to favor like this almost like cutter gyro type slider, and I actually thought the two plane he showed as an underclassman was a little bit better. So personally, I'd like to see both of them. I think he has the aptitude and the ability to do both. But he's a guy I personally think could grab a lot of helium. He'll be at the Super 60 here in February, so I think that's kind of got a chance to be a launching pad for him to be a Bishop Letson type, um, who was a 11th rounder from Floyd Central in the 2023 draft that is now shooting up the Brewers board. I think there is a trajectory for Aiden Smith to make the same type path. And then on his heels, Sammy Swank, workhorse guy out of McCutcheon. I know you've seen Sammy just as much, if not more, than I have here in the last 12 to 18 months. What do you have on Sammy? What's Sammy's path this spring?
Yeah, Sammy. I saw him his sophomore year. I think he touched 94, and at that point, he was getting some real carry on the fastball. I mean, it's always been low 90s. I think he was up to 95 last year. I think the biggest thing for Sammy this spring is just firming up the breaking ball and getting a little more bite. I think the best we've seen of his breaking ball was at Lake Point, our guy Ian Smith down there. I think that was the best I've seen. It was just on video, but that was the best I've seen his breaking ball. In the past, it's kind of been a little more slurvy and just a little light. But I think if he can start throwing it like that, and if the breaking ball is going to trend like that, then Sammy's on the right path in the spring. He also shows a little changeup too. He's always been confident in the breaking ball, but I think he needs to show scouts that he can throw it harder and consistently get bite on it.
Yeah, 100%. A little more teeth, a little more bite. I have Sammy, penciled, but not like, penciled is a good way to put it. Like, I think it's a bullpen type profile with the funk in the arm stroke. But with that being said, right, like he's another guy it's been a comfortable average strike thrower since we've seen it, right? And that's more on the pro scale of it. And again, important to note, right? Like we're talking comfortable average on that scale, right? Like that's a high school guy that goes out and throws strikes consistently, right?
I think
We're
another
Go ahead.
thing with Sammy too is getting swing and miss with the fastball because in the past we've seen he get hit a couple times. If he can get swings and misses with the fastball in the zone, I think that's another big thing for him too.
I would agree with you. I would agree with you. But ultimately, it's like pro body, chance for 97 plus this spring. Like you said, like you alluded to, if the breaking ball makes those strides, right? Like he's a guy that's already quote unquote famous on the professional amongst the professional community. He was an East Coast pro guy, he's two-time area code guy. Scouts know about him, so no doubt that we'll be flocking to see him this spring. And then finally is Beckett Doan. And Beckett Doan is the other one that I would put in the Hudson Devon, like the biggest wild card amongst draft prospects in this class, to where, man, there are some times with Beckett Doan where it's a 6'6" long left-handed arm coming out of right center field with a flat vertical approach, low 90s fastball. What are the question marks that Beckett needs to answer this spring? And then I'll kind of touch on some of the ones that I have personally.
I think the two for me is just not trying to do too much and just being in the zone a little bit more is one, and then number two would be the breaking ball.
Yeah,
Just showing the breaking ball that it can be at least average to slightly above average for Beckett, I think is the biggest thing. I think the best I've seen his breaking ball, or the best two times I've seen his breaking ball, were at the Future Games in 2024 and then last fall. I know me and you both kind of got a quick peek on him, but that I think that was the best I've seen his breaking ball. So that's a positive trend for him that hopefully he can keep trending that way in the spring. And that's the biggest thing for me is the breaking ball.
I would agree with you because of the low vertical approach and frankly just the deception and the way that the ball comes out of the hand. Like he's not a guy that has to be 96 this spring to get a bunch of buzz, right? Like if he's pitching comfortably in the low 90s and maybe touching some threes and fours, like that velocity suffices for him. But you're exactly right. The breaking ball is the biggest thing because he's got to have something to go off of that fastball. And he's got a nice little splitty that is a potential average offering. But at the end of the day, right, like if he's going to go east and west the way that his profile should, he's got to have that slider. And we did see flashes of it at the Grand Park Fall Championships. Like it was 24, 2,500, real sweep, getting to the back foot of righties. But just transparency, right? I saw Beckett probably 5, 6 times in 2026 or 2025, and that pitch was very inconsistent. So like that's the thing that's going to be under the microscope the most for Beckett. But I'll also go back to, man, like that he was the most dominant arm in the state of Indiana as a sophomore in this class. Like there's a real chance that comes back, and and he's doing everything that we talked about, right? Like it is a very good worker if we're talking about Doan. Like he knows the adjustments he needs to make, and so I will be very anxious to see his first start. The progression of him throughout the spring, and I'm excited to hear kind of the feedback from scouts as well. For me, Doan kind of concludes that group of our favorite draft arms. We'll touch on some helium candidates here in a little bit, but now I kind of want to get into the position guys on that are outside of Dunlap, right? Like, um, you know, as a byproduct of kind of what we talked about earlier with diving into the data, uh, you know, hitters out of Indiana aren't necessarily, it's not necessarily a group of players that we see drafted a bunch, right? Like 30% in the last 13 years of our draft picks have been position players. We feel good about Sean being, a potential high round guy. After that, Dylan Bowen's our next favorite, and he's the highest ranked shortstop on our board. He's our number 3 overall player. Um, as for me, he's a guy that I think has a chance, right? And I'll put it as a chance of I almost think he's going to be a better draft prospect in college than I do high school from the end of he's a hit tool guy, he's a game guy first, right? And that's not to say the tools aren't loud. I mean, we're talking about a 6'6" runner with a low 90s arm that can hit balls in the hundreds, right? Those are loud tools, but on the pro scale, none of them are pluses, right? And so for Dylan, like he's done nothing but perform, and we expect nothing but performance from him this spring, and that could easily bring scouts to value him as a potential high round guy. But I also look at him as a draft eligible sophomore out of college. He's a guy that I think there's a real path to him as a day one type draft eligible sophomore coming out of Oklahoma State. And that's what I kind of have penciled in for him as of right now. Ultimately, we're going to do the work. We're going to be there at Hanover Central, seeing him this spring to see, what are the scouts' feedback, right? Because we did see last year, man, the trend of shortstops going off the board from the prep side was immense. And Dylan is valued as a top 25 shortstop in the country for our national rankings. So I say all that to say, like, that could change this spring. He comes out with more power. He comes out with more bat speed. Um, and that could change. Connor, what do you have on Dylan? What do you have on some of these position players?
One question I got for you. You talked about Indiana's known for mostly their arm talent and some left-handed hitters. I know you talked about in your recent article, but what do you have on Dylan as a shortstop? Can he play shortstop?
I think that's one of the questions that's under the microscope, right? Like he he certainly has the athleticism to be a shortstop at the college and professional ranks. I will say though, like, it's every time we have a shortstop come out to Indiana, and I even remember it with Colson Montgomery, who was the number 7 overall pick, right? Like it's can he stick it short, right? Like, and like he's answered those questions, played shortstop in the big leagues last year. But right, wrong, or indifferent, it's always going to go to like Power Four states, right? Like California shortstops, Florida shortstops, Texas shortstops, Georgia shortstops. It's not as much of a hey, like we're gonna take this Indiana shortstop just because we don't get as many reps, right? So my long-winded answer to that would be I think it's within the realm of possibilities, but that's something that along with the raw power, along with the bat speed, that I think is a question for me for the spring, right? Is like is he going to come out and prove like I am everyday shortstop? I am that guy. And again, that's where I go back to. I think him having the opportunity to do that as a draft eligible sophomore at Oklahoma State will give him the opportunity to do that at a high level and do it against high level competition that will make scouts a little bit more comfortable to where, he's a guy that I could easily see, you know, doubling his value in college. I'll put it that way. From what he's valued right now to what he could be as a draft eligible sophomore, I think there's a real chance it could double. Good question. And beyond that, now we move into, and I think really a lot of these position players fall under this bucket. And I think it falls into kind of what we talked about with Cam Decker in the Draft Trends article. Like we've had one right handed hitter selected and signed since 2013, and it's Cam Decker. Right. And so after, Dunlap is a quote unquote switch hitter, right? But like a catcher with a chance to kind of beat the trends, for lack of better terms. But really, all of our top position players in this class hit right-handed, right? And so that's where I do see a large path for those guys like making more money out of college. Talk to me about some of the other hitters that you think could get some buzz or hitters that could elevate their stock this spring.
I think first that comes to mind for me is Aiden Reynolds at Noblesville. He's always hit. I can expect him to continue to hit this spring. He really hit at the fall Grand Park Fall Champs. I know there's some people out watching. He just really hits. Another guy, Rob Zarnicki, he kind of fits the similar mold. I feel like with Dylan Bowen, go to college, hit, and I think his value would be at its peak there. In my opinion, would you agree?
I would agree. It's for me, it's does Rob get back to his sophomore year form, right? And as a sophomore, we saw that guy flash, 5 tools, as in like it was a 6'6" runner as a sophomore, real arm strength, showed in-game power. The bat to ball is very, very advanced for the age. It's hard to put a hit tool grade on a high school kid just because you're grading that out against, a big league competition. But I mean, if we're looking within the state of Indiana, right, it's to me, I think Aiden Reynolds' hit tool is the best of this group, of any position player, right, including Dunlap. To me, Dunlap, Bowen, Zarnicki are kind of those next top spot contenders. So if Rob's able to answer, if he's able to get back to that form, I could certainly see. I mean, we're talking about a center 6'2", 6'3" center fielder with all prereq traits to do that at the professional level. I could see him continuing that ascent, but no, I think I'm more with you in the end of it's a guy that I think he goes to Kentucky. has success in the SEC, and it's a guy that doubles his value in college. Um, so yeah, Connor, you want to touch on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I was just to go back to Aiden. We've seen him hit since, I mean, I wasn't there, but you guys saw him at probably 13U JFG. I've seen him hit throughout all his high school career. What does he have to do in the spring to elevate his stock?
That's a good question because the positionality of it makes it tough, right? Like we're talking about a high school third baseman, if we're being real with it. As we talked about, the bonus pool money does go to the middle of the diamond athletes, right? And so I do see a path to where we're talking Aiden Reynolds as a top 10 round type that could almost be like think Josh Adamczewski signing at slot money, which allows that organization to do some different things throughout their draft, and that's a whole different spiel we could get into. Obviously Adamczewski was a left-handed hitter. I'm not saying that Aiden is going to follow that same path, but it almost fights that same mold of what Josh was, where it was just like, hey, this is that guy that just hits and hits and hits and hits. I think for me, if he comes out and just shows raw power that we haven't seen, I think that's something that could shoot him up boards. I know there are organizations that highly value him. There are that's almost what I'm looking at here of like, how does he perform in front of those guys that already really like him? Does he continue to take those steps up in front of him? I think that's something that could shoot up his value. From the position side of things, right? Like we're talking about a bat first guy, and he's a good athlete. I'm not going to go that way with it, but it's almost like I see his best value positionally as like a utility type that could play second, third, left, right, maybe even first base at the pro level, do a lot of different things just to get the bat in the lineup. Um, and moving on from him, I think there's one more guy that actually, I have two more guys that are kind of in this group for me. It's Jake Winger and Caden Matuzek. Winger's McCutcheon product, will be a benefactor of Sammy Swank, right? A lot of scouts are going to be coming in to see Sammy. I think Winger's 6'5" frame and power potential could be valued and could be something that shoots him up boards. But much of the same for Matuzak, and I think Matuzak, I highlighted him as my biggest spring helium candidate, and he's a guy that I think we could be sitting here, come June, and we're talking about Caden Matuzak as maybe the number three, number two position player on our board, right? Like, here's the deal with Matuzak, and I always go into this as the classes ages, right? Projectability and tools buy you time, right? And that's the allure to Matuzek right now, because the projection and the tool set with that guy, aside from Dunlap, are the best in the class, right? I mean, we're talking about a 6'4" athlete, plays in the middle of the diamond as a shortstop. Going beyond that with projection, he is the youngest player of this group of position players, right? He's 18-1 at draft, which there are organizations that heavily value that, right? I mean, if we're talking about it from we want to put a real world comparison on it, like Caden Matuzak is 16 months younger than Dylan Bowen, right? And so relative age theory, that is a like, he has not lived as much life, right? Like, and so as that gets older, that is not put under the microscope as much. But like I said, there are organizations that heavily value that, and that's something that I think could play in his favor. On top of that, when we go into the tool set, like chance to be an average to above average runner when it's all said and done. We're talking about potentially plus raw power. It's more future raw power, right? Like right now it's a comfortable average, but he's got the twitch and the explosiveness that, it's easy to think at 21, 22 years old. I mean, that's plus raw power. And it's also 95 across the infield, 92 on the bump. I mean, if we're talking tools, like really the only tool that is going to be put under the microscope this spring is the hitability, right? It's the hit tool. So I think if Matuzak, and he's going to be in front of every scout in the area, right, because of Sean's fame, if he comes out and really produces this spring, I mean, look for Caden Matuzak to completely shoot up the board, right? Real chance of that happening. I know there's already some scouts that value him pretty high on their board. Sticking on that like helium type candidate, one of the biggest guys in our last update, and a guy that I think our staff is really excited about in the spring, and another one that's 18-1 at draft, really young. You got a good look on him this fall. I caught the back end of it. Colin Markham, Bloomington South. Talk to me about him.
Yeah, Colin Markham, 6'2", just Athletic, that's what really stands out. I remember the first time we saw him at Bloomington, that's what really stood out was just the athleticism, the move down the mound. The stuff's good too. The slider is like upper 70s, like got potential to be a wipeout. He also threw some changeups that were like showed above average too, that were like really good pitches. I know you saw one of those. I think the biggest thing for him this spring is just putting consistent starts together and getting outs for a couple innings at a time, and just being consistently in the zone and showing that he can get outs. He's got a chance to make some noise this spring. We saw 88, 92. I could easily see that touching 94, 95, and the stuff's good. So Colin Markham has a chance to make some noise this spring.
I would definitely agree with that. Again, it's just like, as we're looking at some of these orgs that heavily value a model, right? Like he checks a lot of those boxes, right? It's young, it's extremely athletic. He's the force production um, that he's able to output is very advanced. Like you alluded to, the consistency has to be there in order for him to be a guy that could potentially get enough money to buy out his Indiana commitment. Um, but like I see a real path there, just like I see a real path with Jackson Leakin from Forest Park. He was a guy that professional scouts started to see some this summer. He's been a little bit of a buzzy name as I've been in conversation with scouts. We're talking about 6'3". At one point in his high school career, three-sport athlete. It's raw right now, but it's like got every prereq trait to be a helium guy. I mean, we're talking the fastball's up to 95 at the MPI last year. The twitch and arm speed he has, he could be just another guy that could be grabbing 96s, 97s this spring. Seen him turn over, a changeup that's serviceable pitch. The slider showed flashes. I think how he comes out of the offseason is going to tell, how highly he is valued, but he's another guy I see as a spring type helium candidate. And also go back to, we got another one at Crown Point, right? Talk to me about Logan Johnson. What's Logan Johnson's path to jumping into this tier?
I really like Logan Johnson. I saw him a couple times in the spring. It's a super projectable. He's 6'6". I saw him mid 80s, upper 80s ish. I think the biggest, he's always thrown strikes and the stuff's solid too. I think the biggest thing for him is just making some jumps. I mean, and the scouts are going to be up there, like you talked about with Matuzik and Dunlap.
Yeah, I would agree with you from the end of like, again, we talked model, right? Like this is a guy that's near 7 foot extension, right? Like if he does the work this off season, puts on the strength to, come out at that, let's call it the 88, 92 range, shores up the breaking ball a little bit. Like to me, that's the biggest question for him. Like I know the fastball is going to be there and it's going to play up because of some of the under the hood properties. Um, is the breaking ball good enough to project it out as at least an average, right? I do think if we're talking future projections, like the changeup is best secondary. It's got a chance to be an average to better pitch when it's all said and done. But ultimately, we're talking about a projection type guy that if he makes the development that he needs to, another benefactor of having teammates that are going to bring scouts to his games. Like it's a guy that could easily be a selection, a sign, another one committed to Indiana. So he's going to have to, get some money to buy that out. But like you alluded to, I see a clear path to it, and I mean, sticking on that trend of, as we're looking at some of these helium candidates, like there are plenty of guys within this talent bucket, but it's more of like looking at what organizations value, and there's some different things that are valued heavily. But one thing that I want to get into with my next guy, and that's Matthew Cook from Hanover Central. Again, yet another benefactor of like, scouts are going to come see Dylan Bowen, so as a byproduct, Cook's going to be in front of their face. Like we're talking about a 6'4" guy who's 18-1 at draft. Again, another highly valued trait with outlier release traits. And that's something that we've started to see, especially for me kind of following the draft the last couple of years, is that, there are organizations that heavily value the ability to go low slot with carry. right? So it's a 5 foot, sometimes sub 5 foot release height with some ride run properties on a fastball that'll get up to 92. It's well above average extension. It's well above average raw spin. And so, we start to couple all of those things together with it's a guy that we've seen in the 88, 92 range already. He's young for the class. If he makes that jump, now we're talking 90, 92, grabbing fours and fives with the outlier release, with the low vertical approach that organizations value, and a ton of pitchability, right? Like that's check, 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 check of a guy that is a potential helium candidate. Evansville commit. So we'll see. He's another guy that obviously we're going to see a ton of because of Hanover Central and Dillon. So that's a guy that, we're going to be on that, but and kind of forecasting this out of who's going to jump before they jump. Like Matt Cook is one of the first on my list. Connor, you have a point on that?
Yeah, one kind of overall question I had for you. I know we're getting close to wrapping up here, but one of the overall questions I had for you is some of the people might not know about the Super 60. Um, I know some of our higher end guys will be heading to the Super 60 in late January, early February. What is the Super 60 and what does it do for guys' draft stocks? Can you just kind of get into that a little bit?
Yeah, so Super 60 is I think it's the mecca of the preseason draft workouts. Again, early date, February 1st. It brings nearly 100 scouts to it each year. There's going to be some of the top draft prospects from across the Midwest, and where it's gotten now, it's across the country at that event. For us, I know right now we have Dunlap will be there, Devon will be there. I believe Aiden Smith will be there. Beckett Doan will be there. For me, that's a launching pad for guys. And I saw it firsthand with Bishop Letson in his draft year. He was a guy that was kind of unknown going into it, went in there, showed a velo jump, showed the traits that he has, and ultimately what it did is it parlayed a ton of looks into the spring. I look at in that data dive that I did, over 50% of our draft picks since 2013 are Super 60 alums. It's well over half of the bonus pool money that our guys have gotten have come from Super 60. Half of our first rounders have come from that event. The best way that I can sum up the Super 60 is, it's the of the guys who are ready to show what they have at that time. It's the who's who of draft prospects, and more than anything, it's a potential launching pad for um, professional prospects before their spring gets underway. It's the opportunity for not only area scouts, but higher level scouts, meaning cross checkers and assistant directors, what have you, to be able to go in there and get looks on an abundance of high school prospects. So that's going to be an exciting one for us. I think we may end up with a couple more guys getting in there, but those are the four that I know that are going to be ready to compete at that time.
Gotcha. I just wanted to let some of our audience to know if they're younger that weren't familiar with kind of the Super 60, and I know that's coming up, so I just wanted to hit on that.
Absolutely, absolutely, and we're also going to have some guys at the Illinois preseason pro case. I thought, some of our guys created some real buzz for themselves there last year, and then kind of I want to wrap up a little bit with this group of the guys that we didn't talk about, whether it's high school or college. Let's talk about, give me 1 to 2 guys that we didn't highlight earlier, real quick hit fashion, who are guys you could see maybe jumping into helium contention this spring, or are guys that like you're convicted in could be potential top 10 rounders coming out of college that we did not highlight.
I think guys that we didn't highlight, I think a college guy for sure for me would be Ryan Murphy out of Brownsburg, left-handed pitcher. Left-handed pitcher is coming to premium. He's one of the better movers on our 2026 board, if not the best mover. The arm works. He really spins a breaking ball. And he's also shown like a solid changeup too. So I think he's a guy that could make some noise out of college. Another guy that I would hit on. Um, I think would be Landon Nikoloff would be another college guy for me. Left hand hitting shortstop, arm really works across. We've seen him. We've always seen him hit. There's the barrel control is real for the class. He's a Harrison kid. I could see him going to college and putting up some numbers and making some noise as well. What about you?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You hit two of my favorite players in this class. I'm talking about guys that are just winners. I'll stick on two like raw but extremely athletic athletes. First, I'll go to Des Francis. I think Des is a Notre Dame signee, so it's like, generally we see Notre Dame guys go to college, right? Like that education and the I wouldn't call it a backup plan, but like that's what comes to mind initially. Like the backup plan of what that education is worth is almost almost impossible to buy out of high school, whether unless it's like we're talking like top 30, top 50 pick, right? But Dez is a guy that, I mean, 6'4" runner with unteachable twitch, chance to play center field. I could see an avenue where that guy goes to Notre Dame, ends up being their everyday center fielder, comes out of there as a high round draft pick. The other one that I want to kind of touch on, he's a guy who I could see this guy grabbing helium this spring. Is Peyton Gray from Heritage Hills. He's a guy that's mostly unknown by the professional scouting community at this point, but I mean it's a left side body, it's loud tools. I mean it's 90 something across with 100 exits, 6'8" run, like chance for a good group of average to better tools. I think he can stick on the left side. I'll put it this way. He also fits in that, like, again, I'm not saying Josh Adam Chesky just from the way that he has progressed into, like, he's got a chance to debut next year, right? But like we're talking about a guy that maybe doesn't sign for that 7-figure sexy bonus, but a scout is convicted in enough that they give a chance to out of high school. I could easily see that with Peyton. And if he does go to college, he's going to go to a Western Kentucky program that is, I mean, exploding onto the scene right now at the mid-major level. One of the best mid-major programs in the Midwest, if not the country, right now. Guy I think could go there, play early, put up really big numbers in that conference, and then ultimately come out of there with a high round tag. So he's a guy that I'm itching to see this spring. I'm itching to see the development. He's a 3-sport athlete all through high school, so I think the development that he can have in college once it's one sport could be immense. But those are my two favorites there. So that's kind of all we have for this one. Like we said, we're going to keep it a little bit shorter of, this isn't as big of a group that we can talk about. It's been really cool to see this group. You texted me after we released it, and it's like, man, this is like the second or third last update for this class. And it's wild because I still remember calling Aiden Reynolds the greatest hitter on earth as a 7th grader whenever he was just coming in, bashing balls all over the place. Another cool story from this group is I remember Gannon Grant coming out of the 14U junior future games, and um, full transparency, Gannon was one of the worst players on that team. Like point blank, I remember there was even internal conversations. Are we even going to rank this kid in the top 20 in our initial update? And to see the work and the development that Gannon has made over the last 4 years is like the coolest part, one of the most gratifying parts of what we get to do, to see him go from that to now one of the best prospects in this class. So I've had a lot of fun with this class. It's really cool to start to, see him grow up into upper level prospects. So that's all that I have. Connor, you have anything else before we outro?
I don't have a ton before we outro. I think this was the first class that I've seen go all the way through high school. I obviously saw the 26, the 23s, 24s, and 25s graduate, but this is the first class that I've seen from freshman year to senior year. So I think that's kind of a cool thing for me, getting to see these guys grow, getting to know a lot of them, and seeing what they've become. I think this class is a little bit special to me because of that.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt, no doubt. And it's also, again, as you touched on, the relationships built within this group are forever something that I will hold dear. And that's something we can say for every class. But again, it's just so gratifying to be able to see those guys as young kids make those adjustments. I remember Landon Nikoloff as the 78-mile-an-hour exit velocity kid at the Bull Scout day as an 8th grader, and now we're talking about him as this is a guy that could make a career out of this, right? So again, really cool stuff. Well, for us, Connor Madden, Cooper Trinkle here with Prep Baseball Indiana. This kind of concludes our 2026 draft forecast podcast. As always, if you're listening to this, I know you're following us on Twitter. Follow us on all our platforms. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. On top of that, if you like what we're doing here, give us a like, give us a subscribe. And as I'll always outro, if you have any ideas of anything you want to see me and Connor come talk about on this podcast, my DMs are open, my emails are open. Gonna have some guests in here soon. Gonna do some yearly wrap up types after our 2027 update. So having a lot of fun with this. So for us, that's all we got. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Looking forward to see you on the next one.